Hi everybody, and welcome to this tutorial, and I'm going to paint an apple in watercolor. And this is just a blurry picture that I found on Pixabay, but I thought it was very interesting indeed because of the casted shadow upon the table. I'm drawing it out extra here, but there's also a casted shadow on the hind wall behind the apple. So that's interesting. And there is the reflection of the apple and all the shadow lights of the Luxaflex. And the morning sun is peeping through. So this will be all about the morning sun and the reflections and the shadows. And what I did is I made just a quick HB graphite sketch of this apple. Nothing fancy-pancy, but this will help me to put in my first layer of paint. And I'm using a sap green, a olive green, and Van Dyke brown. And with this mixture I will simply put in my first sketch, if you want, of the shadows that are being around. And of course that is the left side wall that will be the darkest, and there are all those shadowy lines made by the Luxaflex on the hind wall, and this is the apple shadow cast upon the hind wall. And also the Luxaflex shadows are in the surface of the counter or table where the apple is laying upon. But the lines also go over the apple, as you can see here, and those lines will be rounded because the apple is round, of course. Now once you've put those in, then it's time to pick a color for the background. And because we are dealing with an early sun, a morning sun, I've chosen a little bit of yellow, lemon yellow, and a little bit of ochre for the background. And this also tells us something about the very early morning. So that's an excellent choice, I think. I will see how that dries up. And watercoloring is all about being patient, and that's something that I can use. I've also put that same mixture for the table itself, and here I am using simple blue, the cobalt blue, to put in an extra layer. And here is my second layer for the left hind wall, and blue is an excellent color for pointing out those shadow areas. Now a full-time tutorial, of course, can be found on my Patreon page, also with the starter images if you want. So well, if you're interested in doing simple, easy paintings, or learning about those contradictory colors and stuff, complementary colors, then you can find that on my Patreon page. And here you can see those colors working together. It's the red which is complementary with the green of all the surrounding, and by making use of that red, that apple should pop out eventually, and will really be very playful with all the green that is going around. And the left side of the apple, of course, is the brightest because that is where the sun is hitting the apple. And I've spared out a little piece of white. You can see it on the belly of the apple. So I'm really careful about that piece of white. And I'm already putting in a third layer for the background wall on the left. So that's all about layering, and then I hope that that will bring me some structure there while it dries up. And this is the shadow underneath the apple itself, which is darkest nearest to the apple, of course, and I will brighten that up. And these are the shadow lines casted by the Luxaflex upon the apple. And an apple is greasy by itself, the skin of the apple is. So it will be shiny and it will reflect the kitchen around it. And this is of course the little branch that is on the apple itself. Not all apples have those, but I thought it was very nice for the composition in this case. And you can even draw in a little shadow casted by that little twig there and put that over the apple if you want. So that brings you a lot of 3D feel. And here I will put in an extra layer of water so that the pigments will blend in together nicely. So that's a little bit, I hope that will get a little bit more soft. And then just underneath that there is a lot of shine. There should be a lot of shine peeping through those shadow lines casted by the Luxaflex again. So even though this is a very, very simple still life, if you want, there is a lot to be seen. We have 3 apples going on. We have the actual apple, we have the casted shadow, which is an apple, and then of course we have the reflected apple upon the table. I've made the surface of the table a little bit more interesting by putting those lines in and making it a little bit darker in the front. And let's put in a little bit of more red, just a tiny layer, so the apple will pop out a little bit more. And you can see, even though you use just a little layer of red, it really helps to well, make it a little bit more convincing. And this part is a little bit too yellow, so I simply pick up a little bit of water and then I ease the yellow down. So yes, you can correct the watercolor pigments. You can correct them if you want, so that's not that hard as people might think. Well, let's see, what can we do more? We can make that wall, that left hind wall, we can make that a little bit more dark if we want. And to create that, I'm going to use the Pinus Gray. You can just read it, I think. Pinus Gray. That's a cool colored gray. Very dark pigments. And this hopefully will bring the apple out even more. So here's my 5th layer already for that hind wall. And a little bit of red again. So every time I'm waiting a little bit for the surface to dry, and then I can put in another layer if I need that. So this is how I train my patience, by making use of watercolor too. And well, I'm happy with how the light is going, so that's going okay. Put in these little Luxaflex lines in extra. Ease the apple down a little bit. Just trying to create a little bit of shine upon the apple. As much as I can. It should be shining and it should look very healthy indeed, I think. So put that little dot in there and a little bit of casted shadow, like so. And that's working, so that's great. Well, there's something that's bothering me, and that's behind the apple. So we have the hind wall behind the apple, but I think that should be much lighter, so I will demonstrate that for you. Simply pick up clean water again, put that in the area that's too dark, and then pick up a tissue and voila, it gets lighted up. And by lighting up the area behind the apple, it even pops out even more. So that's just a little tiny detail, but it's very important, and it's helping to put in the contrast a little bit better and create more feel of 3D. So even though this is the simplest study you can imagine, it brings a lot of joy. You learn a lot from it. And well, let's put in a little bit of extra green here for the right side. It's a kind of a reflected color, if you want, from the surroundings. And then my apple is just, well, tasty, looking healthy, and looking playful. So I'm happy with this. I'm ending my study up until this far, and I sure hope you will give this a try. It's so much fun to do. So I would say this is how it dried up, and I'm very happy with it. Even though it's very simple, it's just well, so much fun to do. Hopefully I will see you around, of course, here on the YouTube, maybe on my Patreon page. And well, I would say good luck with your drawings, keep studying, and I will see you again in the next tutorial.